You're tuned in, tuned up, and ready to go. Welcome to Ria's Ham Shack, a weekly conversation about amateur radio, shortwave listening, and radio tech, hosted by Ria Gyro, N2RJ, and heard weekly on WRMI Legends Shortwave. And now, here's your host, Ria.
Well, it's another week, and boy, this week has been an absolute roller coaster. And here we are with the 100,000 watt microphone here on WRMI Radio Miami International as part of WRMI Legends programming here on 5050, and also we get a little bit on 5950. How are you doing? I'm Ria, N2RJ. You know, we got a few things, and I'm gonna spend some time probably talking a little more open and sincere than I have kind of like been reserved, because I think you need to kind of, figure out some things. So this week, the big story in the news is the ARRL is surveying members for increase in the dues. I have some opinions about that, and I think that the dues are an important discussion, but we need to have the right kind of discussion. And I kind of don't really like what I'm seeing sometimes. We'll also take some questions and answers. I'll talk a little bit about the news. I have the new news on Substack, and I really appreciate everybody who's been joining and supporting on Substack. So here we are, Ria's Ham Shack, right here on WRMI Legends. I'd like to thank Ted Randall, Holly, and the rest of the crew, Jeff White, and all the fantastic engineering and people who keep the station running. Well, let's take a break, and you'll talk about Substack coming right up. You love the news on Ria's Ham Shack, you're gonna absolutely love the news on Ria's Substack. So to go to n2rj.substack.com, where you'll find the news, views, and opinions, and all sorts of interesting angles that you will find nowhere else. n2rj.substack.com. It's a weekly newsletter. It's absolutely free. You can sign up. You can tell your friends. You can learn about all the happenings in ham radio for the past week. And, some interesting news, views, opinions, and commentary, which you'll really not find anywhere else. n2rj.substack.com. n2rj.substack.com. We put it in your inbox once a week. And you get a convenient digest to read everything you need to know about amateur radio. n2rj.substack.com, n2rj.substack.com. Be sure to subscribe. Fair warning ahead, there is going to be some ARRL political discussion, and I really hope that you at least listen to some of it, because it's going to be interesting. Now, I will say up front that I'm not bashing the ARRL. I'm not bashing David Minster or anybody. And I do think I do have my own criticism of them. But this is going to focus on the argument for the dues. So the ARRL apparently is in the process of increasing the dues. And full disclosure, when I was a director of the organization, this idea of a dues increase was essentially discussed, and it was probably this whole survey thing that's coming out now is a culmination of that. So there is always been a discussion about, we need to raise the dues. The ARRL needs to raise the dues because the ARRL needs to survive long-term financially. And I agree that they need to survive long-term financially. I also agree that probably the dues might have to be raised at some point. Here's my take. Our friend, I use that term loosely, Michelle Thompson, W5NYV, put out a scathing critique of me, and she didn't mention me by name, but she really laid into me, and I think it was unwarranted. There are some things that in there that are absolutely not true. Then she's been saying, that how I want to cut off the ARRL, and then I hate the ARRL. Nothing could be further from the truth. I love the ARRL. I want to see the ARRL survive and thrive, because you know what? The ARRL has many important functions, and many of my friends are still active as ARRL volunteers, including several directors of the board and vice directors. My friends they work hard. And when I was a division director not too long ago, when I was a director on the board of directors of the ARRL, I worked very hard. And every organization that I try to volunteer in and help out, I work very hard. And I was not paid anything. You do get reimbursed for some expenses, but I mean, that's essentially a net zero because you're not getting paid for anything. The only people on the board who get paid are the CEO, the CFO, and who are officers, and optionally the treasurer can take a salary. That's under the bylaws. Now, if you look in the ARRL balance sheet, you will see that they have had dues, and in the annual report, they put the revenue for dues at around $6 to $7 million a year. And at the same time, if you look elsewhere in the report, they show that every time they raise the dues, they lose members at a steady pace. It is inevitable that you lose members for a dues increase. And this is where I am in a conundrum. Do I support a dues increase knowing that it will lose members, or do I figure, well, some people will come back? And here is my take on the ARRL. I don't really think that a dues increase is going to do good for the ARRL. As a matter of fact, I would do the exact opposite. And, I've been accused by the same person I talked about earlier of being an Elon Musk lover. And I don't necessarily love Elon Musk. I love Tesla, and I love Tesla cars. I love Powerwalls and other interesting things. And being in the solar and renewable energy business, they are the ones to follow. But at the same time, I'm not a fan of some of his personal stuff. I'm sorry, he's just gone off the deep end. But a lot of what I see, though, with him is that he has sort of used the concept of demand levers. And demand levers are where he adjust the pricing on Tesla cars and Powerwalls, and also propositions value for things. And it's not just him. You see that in a lot of other businesses where if they want to attract people to buy a product or service, they will come and they will adjust the price. And a lot of times they'll adjust the price downward. I think there is merit in the ARRL probably offering a lower cost membership, and a lower cost membership that breaks out some of the benefits. This is not going to be a dues hike, but rather a dues reduction. I will say upfront, do not touch the life members such as myself, because they will have, and they are loyal and they're vocal, and they will absolutely riot. I cannot begin to tell you where some people have said, we have a contract, okay? And I'm a life member, and I paid 25 years of dues upfront with the expectation stated at that time under the contract that I would be a member for life, including a printed QST magazine. But maybe for future memberships, you can offer a lower cost membership. They already do it for youth, and they do it for blind radio amateurs, because blind radio amateurs don't get QST, and blind radio amateurs I think are like $10 to $12. They get digital QST, and it's more like a favor to them, sort of, at that low dues rate. I wouldn't really call it a favor. That's kind of insulting, but I would call it more of a a concession given to them, given that they're blind, they cannot read the printed magazines. So yes, you want to kind of give them a concession. The regular membership, the regular membership, I think we could have some of that. I don't know if breaking out the magazine is a good idea, because then you'll have a lot of people who are just subscribing to the magazine only. Because frankly, I talk to a lot of people and they don't even know half of the benefits of the ARRL. The ARRL has some great benefits. It's just that people just don't know what they are, right? People just don't know what they are. I do think that the ARRL should be more vocal about its benefits it provides, and probably give people incentives to use those benefits. I'm a member of several organizations, and some of them you might know. One of them is the American Automobile Association, AAA, and AAA is believe it or not, they're a lobbying group. They're a national association, and actually they're a national federation of auto clubs, regional auto clubs. I was a member of Auto Club of New York. I was a member of AAA Mid-Atlantic. Now I'm a member of AAA Club Alliance, which is in the Mid-Atlantic region. But I joined for the roadside assistance. I joined for the travel discounts. I joined for the maps and travel guides and stuff. I didn't join for any of this lobbying stuff because, quite frankly, being an electric vehicle owner, they might lobby against me. But that said, they did some good lobbying in terms of like lobbying against toll hikes and stuff like that. So they're pretty good. The lesson here is that ARRL probably needs to push a little more of its benefits, because let's face it, people are not going to be just altruistic. There are some people are, but a lot of people are not just going to be altruistic and say, well, yes, I support the league, I support its mission. No, they're not. They want to know, what have you done for me? And they want to know, what have you done for me lately? Okay? And that's just the honest truth. I wish the CEO would see this. He probably does, but he hasn't told me. And one final note, don't beat up on Ted Randall. Don't beat up on Holly. They're good people. They support the ARRL. They love the ARRL. Okay? And they want to see it thrive just like I do. All right, let's come back with the news after this. And I assure you, I want to see the ARRL survive. They want to talk to me, sure. They can talk to me. They know how to reach me. But like I said, sometimes a dues increase is not going to equal a revenue increase. Coming right back. So one of the great things about having an HF radio is the ability to work DX. But you need to know where you can find this DX, and you can actually find all the latest news, tips, tricks, scuttlebutt, and on-the-scene reports at dx-world.net. That's dx-world.net. My friend Call and his fabulous crew of correspondents bring you all the latest DX news from around the world right into your ham shack. Okay, so check out dx-world.net, and they also supply the news here on Ria's Ham Shack. So if you want to get the source of the news, you go to dx-world.net. That's dx-world.net. Well, here is the news on Ria's Ham Shack. Yes, and the news is brought to you by my Substack. You can go to n2rj.substack.com and you can get all the latest news. You can sign up for my newsletter. I try to bring it out on Sunday or Saturday, and it is there for you. So let's talk about the news. The RF exposure rules. So the ARRL and the FCC have, not so much the ARRL, but the FCC has some RF exposure rules. So essentially how this works is that the exposure to human tissue, RF being exposed to human tissue, causes it to heat up. And because of that, the FCC has set some limits as to how much RF can actually reach you. So let me read the news item. The FCC's updates for RF exposure as applied to the amateur radio service came into effect on May 3rd, 2021. Radio amateurs who previously were in compliance were given a 2-year grace period to perform the required evaluation. That grace period came to an end on May 3rd, 2023. All radio amateurs now have to perform RF exposure evaluations. The results do not have to be submitted to the FCC, but it is recommended to keep records with your license and station documentation. And I also linked the video. If you go to the Substack or you go to youtube.com/@n2rj, and you look for RF safety rules, you will see the FCC's RF safety. And yeah, so I've done quite a little bit on this topic, and like I was saying about the value of ARRL membership, the ARRL, to its credit, has done a lot of work on RF exposure. You have the lab doing a lot of things. This new thing is not really new. So what had happened was when the FCC put the new rules for amateur radio, they put a 2-year period that said, well, if you were in compliance before, you don't need to do anything new for another 2 years. Once that 2 years is up, you have to kind of make sure that you did the thing. So what you need to do is you need to go, there's a calculator. There are a few calculators which will tell you how much, RF your antenna installation with a specified power is putting out, and whether it's within compliance. And in my video, I link those, and they will show you what you need to do to be compliant, or whether you are even compliant. So check it out. Now, previously the limits were that, well, if you transmitted below a certain power level, and these power levels were generous, some of them were like 500 watts. So if you kept below 500 watts, you really didn't need to do anything. You still had to obey the rules, you just didn't have to do a full evaluation. Well, the FCC tightened that up, and then you have to do the full evaluation now. But of course, the magic of computers, it's not a big problem. Next news item, ARRL surveys members about a dues increase, and I talked about this earlier. ARRL is conducting a survey of the current and future proposed dues structure with a potential for a significant increase in the annual dues. Questions about the dues structure, bundling of printed magazines, and member benefits were all part of the survey. And I put a link to the survey, so that's arrl.org/take-dues-survey. But it's only for ARRL members, and you must be logged into the ARRL website. I was on Ham Radio Clubhouse YouTube channel a couple of nights ago, and we were talking about this, and we were, I explained to them my position. Of course, I have a lot of inside knowledge at the ARRL. Well, what do you know? Dayton Hamvention's coming up, and I actually posted about this in the WRMI Legends Facebook group. So WRMI Legends, we have a Facebook, we have a official WRMI Legends Club. And in there, I said, Dayton Hamvention, I love Dayton Hamvention. And of course, you can meet me at the Legends booth where I'll be hanging out with the best team in shortwave radio. That is, of course, Ted Randall and Holly and whoever else is there. I will have books to sign. So I will have my Ham Radio Tech books coming up in only a few weeks. Awesome. The theme this year is innovation, and it's kind of funny though that their symbol for innovation has part of a vacuum tube. A vacuum tube might have been innovation in like 1925. Today we deal with a lot of different things. The next one, Moonshot, hams on board the Artemis 2 mission. So NASA is going back to the moon. Artemis 2 is the first recent crewed mission to the moon, and is part of NASA's path to establish long-term presence on the moon for exploration and science. The crew of 4 has 3 licensed amateur radio operators, and 3 out of 4 of the crew are licensed amateur radio operators, but it's not clear whether amateur radio equipment will be on board the mission. Given that amateur radio serves as an important backup communications function for the ISS and other space activities, there may be a good chance that amateur radio will be on board. It also presents an excellent learning opportunity, as ARRIS has done. Owen Garriott, W5LFL, was the first radio amateur to transmit from space in 1983. Ever since, amateur radio has been a constant presence in space activities. Okay, so yes, space is a thing for amateur radio, and I believe one of them couldn't write their exam because they're busy preparing for the flight, but this is worthy. I hope they could make a contact from the moon. That would be so cool. But I always have kids who are inspired by space, like I do the stuff at the charter school, and they're dealing with space. And that's great. Next one is about antennas in Maine. This is really interesting. Trouble in Maine. Residents push back on ham radio antenna installations. Blueberries have been a staple crop in Maine, but lately that crop has given way to aluminum. Aluminum as in amateur radio antennas. And some local residents are not happy. At issue is a remote contest station owned by Krasi Petkov, K1LZ in Jonesboro. The station has several 200-foot towers with stacked beam antennas. And a recent article indicates that residents are opposed due to the visual prominence of the antennas. Legislation is being proposed to require permits and restrict height. However, it is doubtful that it will stand up to legal scrutiny, as the FCC's PRB1 preemption provides for reasonable accommodation for amateur radio antennas. Maine is sought after station location for amateur radio and even shortwave broadcast due to the proximity to Europe and clear shot over the water. Remote amateur station network operators Remote Ham Radio and Be Loud have built several stations in various parts of coastal Maine. Shortwave broadcaster WBCQ has several transmitters in Maine, including a 500,000 watt transmitter and massive steerable antenna array by Ampegon. This station is often used for broadcasting programming about a flat earth around the globe. Isn't that rich irony? So yeah, usually it's a bunch of people who kind of they say, oh, that antenna is an eyesore. Like my neighbor said how she's so not happy right now when I put up my antenna. But it's my property and it's my antenna, so I don't care. We are reasonable. We got all the permits and everything, right? So, yeah. But I don't think they were going to have much trouble. I think the law is not going to restrict anything too much, especially somewhere like Maine. So, you know what, Karens? Yeah, you can have at it. So next, I want to talk about an absolutely fantastic project that is sponsored in part by ARDC. And this is called the ARRL Sparky. Sparki. Woof, woof. Yeah, I had a dog named Sparky, by the way. So ARRL has been a very successful tool, and they're an organization, yes. But they've been a very, very successful tool for inspiring kids about amateur radio, STEAM, that's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, and space. And one of its recent projects was the Space Pioneers Amateur Radio Kit Initiative, or Sparky, which is a toolkit that gives teachers the ability to teach about waves and frequency, basic electronics, codes and ciphers, and software-defined radio. The kits include several tools, including slinkies, snap circuit kits, Morse code keys, SDR hardware, that's software-defined radios, where the radio is in a computer program, a Raspberry Pi, a micro SD card that contains a Sparky OS, which is based on Raspberry Pi OS, formerly known as Raspbian. And of course, if you go to ARDC, the ARDC.net, and then you can check on news and updates, you will see they have a comprehensive blog post. Kudos to ARDC and kudos to ARRL. There are some wonderful people working there, including my good friend, Rosalie White, K1STO, who is the ARRL delegate to ARRL, and she's doing a fantastic job. And I fully support her and her work with the ARRL. Of course, ARDC makes it all possible. And of course, if you want to find out more about ARDC, you can go to ardc.net and you can find out how to apply for a grant for your project. Okay? They're doing some good things. Full disclosure, I am a director of ARDC on their board, and while you will not be interacting with me directly, you'll be going through our wonderful grants advisory committee, and they will, evaluate the grant, and then the board will vote on it, and then they will, they'll give you a yes or no. So it goes to an initial screening process, it then goes to the grants advisory committee, and then it goes to the board for final approval or disapproval, and then it goes to be funded. So that's great. Really great stuff. Really great stuff. And ARDC, as has been said, is making a lot of amazing things happen, including this Sparky project.
I'm afraid of getting thinner. Would you please become my dinner?
Sparky, it was you all the time.
Well, you know, that's one of the best things about radio. You get to be creative. Okay, on to our next story. The Radio Society of Great Britain, the RSGB, is looking to hire a new technical editor for Radcom. And Radcom, as you know, is their monthly magazine. I'm a member of the RSGB. I support them. I read Radcom from cover to cover. Great magazine. The successful candidate will report to the managing editor and will need a wide range of audio and electronic knowledge, including amateur radio. The society is looking for someone who is positive, enthusiastic about technology, and has an excellent command of English and a good eye for detail. For more information about the role and how to apply, visit the website. That is rsgb.org/careers. rsgb.org/careers. I assume you need to probably be in the UK for this. But it would be a tremendous opportunity for someone who wants to write for the Radio Society of Great Britain. Okay, on a final note, and this is not so much news as it's a request for your good thoughts and your prayers, especially. My friend Bill Hudzik, W2UDT, he is the past retired director of the ARRL Hudson Division. He was my colleague. He was at my side all the time when I was at the ARRL. And he's going through a bad time. As you know, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's a few years ago, and it's not been good for him ever since. His wife, Marianne, has reached out to me and said Bill's in the hospital. He's not doing too well. So please keep him in your thoughts and prayers, and keep Marianne in your thoughts and prayers, because Marianne obviously is not going through a good time with this. Okay, Bill is one of the true gems of amateur radio. Bill was my first person who is a volunteer, a representative of the ARRL. Bill was one of those people, and Bill was absolutely fantastic. And quite frankly, Bill's a veteran as well too, and this whole episode with Parkinson's might have been service connected, because he was in Vietnam and they sprayed with Agent Orange. So it's terrible. And we hope and we pray that he has as little pain as possible. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back with the Q&A, which is your favorite segment right here on Ria's Ham Shack. All the ways to listen to Ria's Ham Shack, let me count the ways. The first and the best way is, of course, on WRMI Legends 5050 on your shortwave dial, and other frequencies as appropriate. You can also listen on the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can listen on WRMILegends.com, where we have it on the live stream. You can catch it on the Ria Ham Shack YouTube channel. Just look for youtube.com/@N2RJ. I publish a show, and it's always a few days after it airs on WRMI Legends. And if you want to get the show first, you go on WRMI Legends 5050 shortwave or on WRMILegends.com. Of course, you can also go on WRMILegends.com to find out ways to support the show and support the station, and to keep the tubes glowing and keep the fabulous shortwave programming coming. Now back to Ria's Ham Shack. All right, let's talk about the Q&A. And of course, you can get your questions answered, Ria at n2rj.com. Ria, that's Romeo India Alpha at n2rj.com. So I normally take a healthy smattering of questions all over the internet, but of course I love answering your questions. And there are a few Facebook groups that I can point you to that I lurk in and I also contribute to. Ham Radio 2.0 is one of them. Also Ham Radio / New to the Hobby. So there are a few of them there that I go through. So, here's a question for you, and this one might be controversial. Can you use any radio if you don't have a license, if there's a dire emergency? And upfront, I will say, this is not legal advice, one. And two, if it were me, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. I mean, that's my motto. If my life is in danger, if my family's life is in danger, especially my children are in danger, I will do whatever it takes to protect them. Because that kind of love transcends anything written on a piece of paper. With that said, what does the law say? So the FCC says in Part 97, and I did cover this in my technician book, and in my technician book, it says how an amateur station may use so the text actually says, and I want to bring it up here, safety of life and protection of property, right? And safety of life and protection. I want to get this proper, okay? So the FCC says that well, first of all, it does mention the safety of life and property. And 97.403 in several sections says no provision of these rules, this is in Part 97, prevents the use by an amateur station of any means of radio communication at its disposal to provide essential communication needs in connection with the immediate safety of human life and immediate protection of property when normal communication systems are not available. So there are a number of things. So let's go backwards. So they said when normal communication systems are not available. That one essentially means that, well, your cell phone's not working. You don't have a GMRS radio is not working. Okay. You don't have any other means to contact emergency services. And by the way, cell phones, even if they're not activated, even if they have no SIM card or no eSIM, like my iPhone 14 Pro Max has an eSIM. It actually has 3 eSIMs on it right now. One of them is for overseas communication, and the other 2 are for United States for my 2 phone numbers. So an eSIM, if you don't have an eSIM in a phone, you can still dial 911. And a little thing to note is that you can also dial 112. So 112 is the global GSM emergency number. So it says here, when normal communication systems are not available. So if you don't have a cell phone or you don't have cell phone service, sure. Okay, so that's one of the conditions. The immediate safety of human life and immediate protection of property. What does this mean? A classic example that comes to mind is if you're in an auto crash, a car accident. I don't like the word accident, okay? If you're in a crash, if you have an incident in your vehicle and, you're hurt or one of your passengers is hurt and you need to get a hold of emergency services. And how you do this, it really doesn't matter. And I would say it really doesn't matter at all how you do this. I will use any means of communication at my disposal. I'll use my cell phone. I'll use a ham radio. I will probably even, use signal flares or something like that, or a flare gun or something to catch the attention of somebody if I need to. But usually I have a cell phone or two. I usually have 2 or 3 cell phones available for various purposes. Those who know me know what those various purposes are. Yeah. And they have to do with security research. Okay. So, yeah. So that is the interesting thing. But it must be immediate safety of human life. So if, for example, you just have severe weather, you just have storms, you just have a hurricane, you can't just get on the police radio and use that. No way. So the other one is essential communication. But the big one that a lot of people don't seem to understand is no provision of these rules prevents the use by an amateur station. By an amateur station. So this applies to amateur radio operators. It applies to licensees, to people with a license. It does not apply to unlicensed persons. This is confusion. So if you have a license, and as odd as the rules are, only if you have a license, this applies to you. But like I said, right? Common sense. If I'm in a situation, and well, I have an amateur license, but if somebody else has if one of my children are in the process of getting their amateur license, lots of people ask me, okay, if somebody doesn't have an amateur license and they pick up an amateur radio, or they pick up some kind of radio, they even have like a Baofeng programmed into police frequencies to transmit, although I don't know why you do that. But if you do have that, and it is your only means at your disposal of communication, then if your license is okay. If you're not licensed, technically it's illegal. It's stupid as it sounds. But you know what? Like I said, better be judged by 12 than carried by 6. If my children or myself are in any kind of danger, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get them out of that danger. Okay? I will sacrifice my own self for that. So that's it. So, so that is what it is. And that's a very confusing question. A lot of people don't understand, okay? So, it is it is an interesting conundrum. And that's a good thing. Here's a good question. What are the WARC bands, WARC, and why would I use them? Well, the WARC bands are 30, 17, and 12 meters. And they actually came out by the World Administrative Radio Conference in the 1980s. And the ARRL lobbied for and got them. They're free from contests by gentleman's agreement. And they also have interesting propagation on them. You do need an antenna for them. My favorites are 30 meters because it's mostly digital and Morse code. There's also 17 meters, which is voice, digital, Morse code, pretty much anything goes, right? Here's another question. I hear call signs on the air that are 1-by-1 call signs. They have a single letter, a number, a digit, and then a letter. How do I get one of those? Well, that is a special provision of the FCC rules, and this is United States, of course. And you can get a 1-by-1 call sign, and you can get they have, the FCC does not allocate these to regular amateur radio operators. Like, we don't get a 1-by-1 call sign to keep for ourselves. They have them in a rotation. And the rotation is that they have them in a pool, and you can then apply to use one. And then once you apply to use one, you can have that for a particular period of time. I believe it's 2 weeks. And it might be more than that, but I've seen a lot of people. So 1-by-1 call sign, they you have that available. There are 750 such call signs, and you can have it up to 15 days. So yes, 2 weeks, a little more than 2 weeks. Once you reserve the call sign, you can use it. So let's say I get, Kilo 2 Alpha or something like that. Just a whatever. Kilo 2 Alpha, K2A. I could use that for 15 days. But the catch is that I can identify as that, but every half an hour I must say my personal call sign. So let's say I'm operating on voice and I say this is K2A Kilo 2 Alpha, K2A Kilo 2 Alpha, and I call CQ and I get contacts, and then after half an hour I will say, this is K2A Kilo 2 Alpha being operated by N2RJ. And that's all there is to it. And you want to know something? Like if I operate like another call sign, like if I operate W1AW from ARRL, the Maxim Memorial Station, I also would use my personal call from time to time, not to identify, because the thing about the Maxim station is that when you operate the Maxim station, you must use W1AW, period, because that is the station. It's not for your own personal call. You have to operate using the station's call. But I will tell people my personal call. I said, by the way, my personal call is N2RJ, and I'm here operating W1AW. So anyway, how do you get a special 1x1 call sign? Well, you apply to them through the coordinators, and the coordinators are essentially the volunteer examination coordinators, and you can apply at the special website 1x1callsigns.org, right? 1x1callsigns.org. You apply to any one of the coordinators, and they're usually some of the VECs, the volunteer examiners coordinators. So I see they have Laurel Amateur Radio Club, W4VEC, W5YI VEC, and they have an online request form. And you have WCARS VEC, and you also have the ARRL. So when you go to the online request form, actually on 1x1callsigns.org, you can select the coordinator you want. I use, either one of them. I might use Laurel. I might use W5YI. You fill out the forms, and you, of course, put contact information of the person who is responsible for the operation. You do the dates, and then you submit, and then you usually get the authorization back in a day. And it's put in the database. Now, they want to have you have an event of special significance. And, so you can't, for example, celebrate Ria's birthday, right? Although that they might let that slide. You can't do that. But you might be able to celebrate George Washington's birthday or the birthday of the United States of America. In that case, there is actually a special event that uses several of these call signs. It's called the 13 Colonies event. And it celebrates the original 13 colonies, one of which is New Jersey. So I will actually be operating this year as K2I as part of the New Jersey operation. Sounds good, right? Yeah, and there are several others. Sometimes the expeditions use them, like you had K5D for Desecheo, K1N for Navassa Island, and it's a very interesting. So in other countries, of course, not to leave out other countries because we are international shortwave, what happens in those countries? Well, in those countries, their regulators have different rules, and they have a lot more interesting call signs than we do. They might have, in Canada, you can apply online, and they had a bunch of young guys apply for Meme Appreciation Month, and it was kind of funny because they, they really, they were able to. I think it was VE7 Ligma or something like that, or those who know that meme will know that. But a lot of them have, a lot of them have that. So yeah, it's very interesting. So this question is, this person says he's a ham for a while and he's interested in ham to use VHF and UHF when he's out exploring. off-road. He says none of his friends or families are hams and they have no interest in getting a license. He switched to GMRS, but he have cheap ham HTs radios. Does anyone ever use VHF or UHF on low power HTs for family comms? Well, first of all, I have good news for you. And it's not that you saved a bunch of money on your car insurance, because no, I can't. I hate to break it to you, but I can't save you money on your car insurance. What I can tell you is that with a GMRS license, and I have a video about getting a GMRS license, you can operate, your family can operate under that license with the same call sign. Yes, you can. And the family definition of family is quite broad. It includes your in-laws and such too. So everybody goes out on a family hiking trip, you can use the GMRS radios. And GMRS radios, especially the ones from China, are getting cheaper all the time. I wish I could buy one made in America, but I don't see any, you know. But there are a number of different ones, and you can get them cheaply. Of course, if all you need is short range comms, you can get a pair of Family Radio Service FRS radios. I have like a dozen of them now, and you can anybody can use that without a license. If you want a little more range, you can use MURS, multi-use radio service. And the cool thing about MURS is that MURS does not only does MURS not need a license, but you can attach an external antenna. The difference is that you cannot use repeaters on MURS. Okay, so there are advantages of all of them, and I would say that it's not it's not a bad thing to have options. As an amateur radio operator, I have options. And of course, I also have a GMRS license, and so hey, just be careful, just be careful and have options, okay? All right, and this other question comes on: what 10-meter vertical antenna to buy? Mono, dual, or tri-band? Okay, so the thing about a 10-meter antenna is that usually you probably are going to invest in a multi-band antenna, and a multi-band antenna will give you 10 meters in addition to the other bands. What I did some years ago, though, was I actually bought a CB whip from Radio Shack, and when Radio Shack was still in business, and I trimmed it down. And then when I trimmed it down, I was able to use it on 10 meters quite easily. So that's one option, because 10 meters is just a little bit more wavelength than 11 meters, which is the CB band. So you're good with that. One other thing, though, is that if you're buying multi-band antennas, like he mentioned tri-band antennas, and these are designed for specific radios, like the Yaesu FT8900R is a radio that was designed to work on 6 meters, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and 10 meters. And it's really designed for FM, because all it has is FM. It's designed to get into the repeaters. So you could usually get like a quad band antenna that would be able to work on all 4 bands. And that's essentially all there is about it, So yeah, it's really, really interesting that you would that you'd want to get on 10 meters. And 10 meters are good for technicians, I think. I think the idea of giving technicians 10 meters was that they could convert from CB radio. Next question. How can you tell what type of element your microphone is and how to properly test it? Okay, that's a good one. And usually the manual tells you what kind of element it is, but usually if it's a light, and most radios now come with this type of element, it's a light microphone, it usually is a condenser microphone, electret condenser. And the handheld radios usually has a small, little, dinky little, it's about the size of a dime, and it's thick, but it's, it's about the circumference of a dime. And those handheld radios, they usually have a small diaphragm. And small diaphragm is good for, they're good for high frequencies and communications audio. If you're recording, like for me, I'm recording on a little larger diaphragm condenser microphone, which is it's designed for essentially recording speech and audio and probably music too. Yeah, that one's going to have a larger diameter. Now, a dynamic microphone has something else. A dynamic microphone has a moving coil. It's essentially a speaker, and the speaker generates the waveform. Now, this is the thing, and there are trade-offs to both. The dynamic microphones are good for rejecting room noise. So, and a popular dynamic microphone is the Shure SM58, Shure SM58. And every sound person, every audio engineer has at least one of them in their toolkit. Of course I do this radio. I also do production for worship, and I also do a lot of audio and video engineering. And yeah, I have several SM58s that I use for that. I do for live events. I might do for church. I'll do for other things. So, and the beauty of that is that I could have that playing out where the loudspeakers are with not much feedback, because the dynamic microphone is that. I have several condenser microphones, and they're a little more sensitive, and they're a little more crisp. They could get a little more crisp sound. So I use them for recording music like pianos and such like that. I also use them for speech, and I'm using one right now. I'm using an Audio-Technica AT2020. And you use them for that kind of stuff. So for amateur radio, I say if you have a noisy room, use a dynamic microphone. If you have a not noisy room, you can use a condenser microphone. And there are benefits to both. Right? So, and the condenser microphones usually have a bit of an amplification. Today it's a field effect transistor, FET, but sometimes past it was a tube, and they're still tube condenser microphones. They're just really expensive, and they have special power supply requirements. So this next question is, I want to put up a repeater. Do I have to apply for permission? The answer might surprise you. The answer is no. You do not have to apply for any kind of permission to put up an amateur radio repeater. Amateur radio really doesn't have any reservation of frequencies. We have what you call coordination. And coordination is defined in FCC rules as where you have a local coordination group that coordinates frequency pairs for repeaters. But what they do is that if a repeater is coordinated, the FCC gives them priority in terms of interference complaints. This means that if a coordinated repeater and an uncoordinated repeater interfere with each other, the coordinated repeater wins. I'm of two minds in coordinators. I like some of the coordinators. I think they do excellent work. But the other thing is some of them are tied up in politics. And it might be worth looking at putting up an uncoordinated repeater. If that's the only way you can get one, just be mindful of interference. You stay out of everybody's way, and you're good to go. Sometimes it could get political, but I'd love to see repeaters being occupied and repeater frequencies being occupied rather than just staying dormant. I really want to see, people use ham radio in many different ways, and repeaters are one of them. They're a very important part of VHF, UHF, FM amateur radio, and I want to see them survive. And finally, I have a question. This question here is about what sort of antenna to use due to limited space, considering a Hustler 6 BTV, but they don't have much room to add radials in the 360 direction. Let's see here. Okay, so if you're adding a Hustler 6 BTV, That one requires radials. It does require radials. Some people try to avoid the radials by, they use a feed line choke, and it performs poorly. But the good thing about radials is that radials don't have to be straight out. Radials can be, essentially, you can string them out, you can curve them, you can kind of wig-wag them, like make it go zigzag, and they'll be fine. You can have several short radials, you can have a few long ones in whichever direction. My 6BTV had a bunch of radials in a bunch of different directions of a bunch of different lengths, and the antenna performed well. Of course, it'll perform like a vertical, meaning it radiates poorly in each direction. That's a joke. But it will work, and it's a good antenna if you're compromised, and it doesn't take up a lot of room. Consider a 43-foot vertical if you can, because that one has the ability to do a lot more DX, and you can definitely work the world with that. And my friend Steve WX2S, Steve Masticola, he even has a QST article where he talks about a matching network for 80 and 160 meters, and he's doing gangbusters on 160 right now. I'm telling you, he's working all sorts of DX, making a lot of DX that's like really far out. But he has a good location too. He lives near to Joe Taylor, to be honest. And Joe's a good friend. And speaking of Joe Taylor, if you're using the FT8 modes or using CW Morse code, you will be able to get out a lot further than if using voice. That's not to say don't use voice, because I like to get on the air and talk on voice. But you know what? I love CW Morse code as well too. It's my favorite mode, Morse code, all of them all. Sometimes you just got to reach out and talk to someone. Really nice. Well, you know what, gang? It's been fun. And like I said, one final note on the dues. We need the ARRL. We all need the ARRL. We don't need the politics of the ARRL, but we need the ARRL, and we need to rescue it from the path that it's on. We do probably need to think long and hard. I don't know if I will answer the dues survey, because the ARRL kind of knows my stance on dues, especially since I was in on the discussion. So I'm probably not going to say much. I might just answer the questions. People have been getting responses already from the league, from Minster already. So yeah, I'm probably going to hold out until the end. Either way, I'm in amateur radio for life, and I'm always here to help and mentor people until I can no longer do so. This has been another Ria's Ham Shack right here on WRMI. Just a quick note, we have some videos on the channel. We have about RF safety. We have about the 60 meter discussion. I have one regarding USB Type-C on amateur radios, and all sorts of interesting stuff. I hope to see you at Dayton Hamvention. We will be there. I'm definitely going to be there, and I will not miss it for the world. I enjoy hanging out with all of my ham radio friends at Dayton Hamvention. And I will be at Ham Radio Friedrichshafen in Germany, in Europe. So all of you who are listening in Europe, at least if you can attend, and I know it's tough for some people, especially our friends in Ukraine right now who are fighting this war. I really hope that you're able to make it and we have a good time. All right. Ria's Ham Shack is always heard on WRMI Legends. That's 5050 on Fridays at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes it's heard on other frequencies. Right now they're playing it on 5950. And in UTC right now during the summertime, it's playing at 2100 UTC. Right here on WRMI Legends. All right, my friends, as I always say to you, my loyal audience, peace and 73.